What's cracking, everybody? Zerfelros here, bringing you some Pokemon Go Battle League content. Today's video, we're taking a look at the upcoming Great League Remix, some best teams and picks for this upcoming meta that we're going to have for 2 weeks, and typically, the Great League Remix is a good one. It's never really been a disgusting, toxic, no fun cup like some of the ones we've had. Great League Remix has always stuck out to me as a very enjoyable meta, and we have the ban list right up here on the screen. I'm assuming they took this from 2 seasons ago. As usually what Niantic likes to do from what I've seen is they will take the usage data, like let's say they release a announcement of next season, this season, right? So at the end of this season, they'll give us an explanation, and then they'll say, here's the ban list, and that ban list would have been for next season, the previous season. So we basically got a ban list from 2 seasons ago, which is why you're not seeing anything like Gligar and the like on here, because it was before, it was probably before the Wing Attack, but anyway, Wing Attack buff. But anyway, so Alolan Sandslash, Wigglytuff, Lickitung, Lantern, Azumarill, Umbreon, Skarmory, Vigoroth, Medicham, Whiscash, Altaria, Registeel, Deoxys, Bastiodon, Galarian, Stunfisk, Talonflame, Trevenant, Chargebug, Skeledirge, and Clodsire are all on the ban list, which means Gligar, Annihilate are gonna go crazy. But you know what? I'm totally fine not seeing Whiscash, Skarmory core for once, and trust any meta without Lantern, in my opinion, is a good one. So let's check out the rankings here, pick out some teams and picks that I like a lot here, as we always do. So Carbonk sitting at the #1 spot in the rankings, and it does have very interesting play into this meta, but as well, you can also see quite a bunch of water types, some steals here, things that would probably put, you know, quite a dent in Carbank's day. One of the things that stands out to me here on these rankings is Feraligatr and Empoleon. 2 very, very strong Pokemon here. Annihilate being number 11 on the rankings. I think Pelipper is going to do very well in this meta, as well as Mantine. You know, thank goodness there's no Lantern to just shut those down, but there are other electrics which you have to be careful of. Going a little further down here, I'm always a fan of Guzzlord. Shadow Golbat's one of my favorite remix picks. Cresselia is going to shine pretty well. Aurorus has a place here as well, if you can just keep it off of those fighting types. And then as we continue down, you know, I also like Goodra, or not Goodra, I love Goodra. Gallade and Goodra are 2 picks that I also enjoy in this meta. And it's not quite up here, I don't think, but Unova Stunfisk is something that just somehow always manages to core break like every single one of my Great League Remix teams whenever I make them. So that gets an honorable mention for being frustrating. But let's get into the first team here, because that team is going to be, I think, one of the best in this meta. And so we've got Serperior with Carbink and Dugong. And now the reason why this team is the way it is you are going to use Serperior as a, you know, pretty much, you know, beat all the water leads and even the Carbink leads as well. But also you've got Dugong in the back as your safe swap, being able to debuff with Icy Wind, and has pretty much perfect coverage against most things, and will lure out those fighting types. You could easily put something in the lead like, you know, Golbat, or something like, you know, you could even put like, you know, Mantine if you want to, or something, to deal with fighters better. But in my opinion, like after you've Icy Winded things a couple of times, you know, Serperior eats a lot of those moves very nicely. And Dugong is a very good anti-flyer, and Carbink is like one of the premier anti-flyers of the meta, if not the premier anti-flyer. So you have a very strong core with Serperior Carbink. I like it a lot here. The letter coverage is, you know, Great League Remix is just like Great League, where you can literally not cover everything. It's just impossible. But as far as I can see in the scorecard here, the coverage on this meta is insanely good. And when you're really only losing to like Venusaur, okay, sure. Victory Bell, okay, sure. We start looking at things like Berserker, Sneasler, Toxicroak, Decidueye, like, I'm not super worried about those things, because I don't expect to see a whole ton of them. You might see one of these things once in a while, but definitely not expecting a lot of those. So team looks extremely strong, very, very good in this meta. Let's take a look at another one. So this next one is going to be Mandibuzz Double Water. So we're not using any Mudboys on this team, although you definitely could. Quagsire came up as a top alternative pick for Empoleon in this in this team here. But I love the dynamic that goes between Mandibuzz and Empoleon in this meta. I feel like they're going to be a very strong duo, and it's just going to be a matter of trying to figure out what you can use to try and use, you know, as a safe swap to try and get one or the other the alignment they may need. So like, for example, if you're going to put, you know, Empoleon is literally, I think, the hardest answer in this entire meta to Carbink. And then you've also got Mandibuzz, which is probably the weakest thing in the entire meta to Carbink. So if you were going to be using anything, I think Shadow Feraligatr is probably one of the best options. You could use normal as well if you don't have a Shadow. We're gonna kind of ignore letter grades because it's almost like having open Great League. It's just there's too much to really truly cover all of this. And Mandibuzz does technically beat both of the waters here. So if you do encounter a Mandibuzz lead, it would probably be best to try and chip it a little bit and then get into the Feraligatr or the Empoleon at some point. But aside from that, Guzzlord is also a little bit more uncomfortable, and Shadow Feraligatr only gets it by landing an Ice Beam. But so Guzzlord could be a core breaker here. Toxapex is, you know, pretty neutral overall. I think it would do just fine. But this team is incredibly weak to Electric, which is probably my Achilles heel. It's also very weak to Poliwrath. So I don't think there's going to be too many Poliwraths, considering that Annihilape and Gligar are going to be on a lot of teams. But you very may well see some Poliwrath, and this team is definitely not going to have a good time against most Poliwraths, unless you're able to somehow tag team it between Mandibuzz and Feraligatr, or you're able to get the Drill Peck off with against the Poliwrath with Empoleon here. But as far as threats go, I feel like after that, like Electric and Poliwrath, like the entire rest of the list is pretty nondescript. Things that you're probably not going to see a bunch of here. So I definitely don't mind this. But again, you know, it's really about having strong answers to Carbink, which Mandibuzz really needs the help with. Let's get into the next team here. So we've got a team here that is going to allow Aurorus to do what Aurorus does. And if you don't have an Aurorus, use Dugong. Or most other ice types in this meta will do fine. Even Walrein would do well here. You just want like a really good answer to Flyers, essentially, in the lead. And then we have Chestnut. And I think, you know, we've seen some coverage on Chestnut earlier in the season here on the channel. Chestnut, a very, very interesting pick with the fighting and grass coverage. You just really need to be able to deal with Flyers. So for that reason, we've got Annihilape on the safe swap, as its energy is almost always going to be used somewhere, and we've got Ice Punch on it rather than Night Slash, just because it is a safe swap in case you do draw out those Gligars, which is entirely the point of this team, is to use the safe swap Annihilape to bait out the Flyer that they may have in the back. And if they have two in the back, then you just gotta hope that Aurorus can really clutch up and handle the team. And again, if you don't want to use, you know, Annihilape, you could use another grass type. If you don't want to use Aurorus, you could use, you know, you could use Carbink if you want to. And for Chestnut, you could use, again, another fighter or grass type. You can kind of swap this team around in any way that feels more comfortable to you. But as always, I try to make, you know, more unique teams without reusing the same Pokemon over and over again, because what's the fun in recycling 3 teams with the same 3 Pokemon on them, let's be honest. So, so team overall has some pretty good coverages here. I feel like Annihilape does well into Carbink when it's in the 2 shields, because the only reason that they're going to be able to beat an Annihilape is if it lands the Moonblast. I'd have to imagine Annihilape probably wins in the 2 shields. And a lot of other things here you're going to have good coverage against. And again, you could use a grass type instead of Annihilape if you want to, something else that is going to be able to do well in that situation. But overall, the coverage in this meta is just fairly incredible. Gallade and Serperior, and then Shadow Charizard. And again, Shadow Charizard's a pretty, you know, unlikely thing to catch here in this meta. But you might see a few, but I would say, like, Serperior, and again, this is why you could just use, you know, something else that's not, you know, Aurorus if you want to. But I think the ice coverage on Aurorus does just fine here. Gallade's also a pain, so be careful of falling Gallades. Let's take a look at another team here. So I know I don't always reuse things, but I did reuse Mandibuzz here because it did core the best with the Stunfisk that I saw. But again, honorable mention to the Unova Stunfisk. The stupid thing always is just a pain in the neck for me when I'm team building, and it's definitely one of those electric types that is very good at what it does. Very spammy, pretty bulky, and cores very well with Flyers. And because there's no such thing as Lantern in this meta, Pelipper could be a very good safe swap to draw out Carbink, as it's going to be able to get several Weather Balls off before a Carbink could possibly farm it down. And you could get 3 Weather Balls off before the opponent would be able to fire off a move and then shield and then throw another move. So before they get to 2 Rock Slides, you're at least getting 3 Weather Balls in, which would do a lot to a Carbink if they don't shield any of them. So I like the Pelipper a lot. The safe swap Pelipper is always something I'm looking forward to trying. Guzzlord is very not nice to this team. If you don't want to use Unova Stunfisk, you could certainly try something like Steelix, as Pelipper and Steel typically go very well together. I wanted to put Empoleon on a team like this, but it just didn't really mesh that well because of the weakness to electric. So you could do an alternative team to this would be Mantine and Pelipper in the back, and then you have like Steelix in the lead. That would be a very reasonable substitution for this team. But overall, the coverage here, very nice in general. And you would really have to be careful of Empoleon with the aforementioned team. So that's kind of why I think that Unova Stunfisk is better, because it handles Empoleon much nicer, as it's doing all super effective damage no matter what fast move you're using. Plus, you resist the Steel Wings, which is really nice to be able to have that. And Mandibuzz does well against so many things. And again, we're just using Pelipper as our safe swap here to lure out those Carbinks. Or other electric types, honestly, that would work as well. Dugong could certainly be an interesting problem for this team, as well as most other ice types. So, you know, play that, you know, to what you will. But Guzzlord also could be a bit of a pain if you can't land the Hurricane with the Pelipper, or can't get some energy on your Ufisk. So let's take a look at just one more team here in the Great League Remix. Great League Remix Greninja is something that I've always appreciated. That's actually the first meta where I brought out the Greninja for the first time and had a ton of fun with it long before it got Water Shuriken and Hydro Cannon. Cresselia and Greninja form a pretty decent core in this meta, and Steelix on the safe swap, what we're primarily trying to do is draw out the Annihilate or the Poliwrath and use Cresselia to dispatch of that thing, or use the Psychic Fang Steelix to attempt to flip switch if at all possible. And then you're just trying to keep Greninja off of the fighter in the back, and also potentially Grass type too. Grass could be a potential issue for this team, but I feel like the bulk of Steelix and Cresselia really do good here. Really only having an issue-ish with Mandibuzz, but you've got Moonblast, and Steelix is able to put some consistent damage out to at least get it low enough here. So I like this team quite a bit. Not so much spicy, but again, we see, you know, Superior coming in as something that could beat this team here, as, you know, Cresselia is not an anti-grass by any means. And really the only things that do beat this team in its entirety are these grass types. So, and I feel like you could certainly, you know, weasel your way out of all of those particular Pokemon as far as being able to, you know, get some sort of advantage for one of your two Pokemon to dispatch of a grass type. So let me know in the comments, y'all, what team you are planning to play in this Great League Remix meta. I'm seriously looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I am going to be away for the first half of next week, so I won't be able to stream it for you guys. And you'll hear about this tonight on the stream, as I stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Come check it out. We're going to have a good time playing some Great League Remix. And we'll catch you guys in the next one, hopefully. And bye-bye.